Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite currency items and mechanics in Path of Exile. How they work and how you guys can make some silly money by using them. This is, of course, the corruption. These can be obtained by using Vaal Orbs and further augmented by using Omens of Corruption. For those of you who played the first Path of Exile, you'll be familiar with the mechanic. However, there are some important changes which I'm going to detail for you guys today. Before we get started though, if you're new to the channel or to the game, first of all, welcome to PoE. You're in for a ride, for sure. My name is Belton. I've been making PoE content focused around crafting and making currency for over a decade, having made thousands of mirrors and hundreds of mirror items in the original PoE. I'm excited to bring that background to PoE too, and I look forward to sharing that journey with you guys. If these types of videos are up your alley, it'd be great if you could drop a like on the video and consider subscribing to the channel. With that being said though, let's get into it. So, how does a Vaal Orb work? Here's the Vaal Orb here. And a Vaal Orb, similar to PoE 1, can result in one of four possible outcomes. These are going to vary slightly depending on the recipient item, is rare or unique, as well as gems, maps, and some other different categorizations. If an item is unique, the four options that it can do are: number one, it will do nothing. Number two, it can add one socket. This can exceed the socket limit of an item, but it cannot add a socket to an item type that cannot have a socket to begin with. So things like belts, rings, amulets, and the caster weapons. The third thing it can do is add a corrupted modifier. Now, one thing to note that is different than PoE 1 is that corrupted modifiers in PoE 2 are enchants and not implicits. This means that the original implicit of the item, if it has any, will be preserved. For example, the Headhunter belt here, you can see the implicit is the stun threshold, and the enchant is the corruption there with the endurance charge. In PoE 1, the endurance charge would have been the implicit. Now, the fourth thing, and this is kind of the coolest mechanic with it, and one that's probably going to take the most amount of time to get adjusted to, so bear with me here. Now, the fourth option is that it can change at least one affix on an item to increase or to decrease by upwards of 22%. This will happen after randomizing the value within the item's range, so similar to a Divine Orb. This value in departure from PoE will be rounded up. For example, if you had an affix that had 3 as its modifier value, if you got a maximum roll of 22% and it chose the 3, that would be 3.66, right? So 3 times 1.22, that would be rounded up to a 4. In Path of Exile 1, it did not round up. This also means, by the same token, if you have a 2 as an affix value, that would go to 2.44 as a maximum value in the range, and therefore it would round down. The range of times 0.78 upwards of times 1.22 is randomly based, with those two numbers reflecting the maximum ranges. It is also possible for multiple affixes to be changed at the same time, with additional affixes being a less common outcome. And I know that's a mouthful, and don't worry, I'm going to demonstrate this stuff after. I'm just going to go through and explain to you how they work first. Now, so that was for unique items. Now, if they're rare items, the four options are going to be: it can do nothing, it can re-roll all of the items' prefixes or suffixes. So in Path of Exile 1, if you used a Vaal Orb and it would brick, as it was commonly referred to, it would turn into a rare item with completely randomized mods. In Path of Exile 2, it'll just pick all of your prefixes or suffixes. So, for example, on this bow here, I've got the really good fizz prefixes, but the suffixes are still a work in progress. If I used a Vaal Orb on this and it chose that outcome, it could potentially change all 3 prefixes to something random or all 3 suffixes. The third thing is that it can add a corrupted mod, the enchant, as we discussed already. And the fourth thing, similar to unique, is that it can add a socket. It is not possible to roll the range, however, on a rare item. For gems, if you're doing a gem, the four options are: it can do nothing, it can add or subtract one level, which can also allow gems to exceed the maximum level. So a level 20 gem can go to level 21. It can add or remove a socket. This cannot exceed 6 sockets, but is potentially a much cheaper way to go from 5 sockets to 6 sockets, as opposed to buying a perfect jeweler's orb. And the last thing you can do is to add or subtract quality. One thing to note as well is that if you have a corrupted gem, you can still use uncut gems to level it to a higher level. So let's say you had a level 17 lightning arrow and you used a corrupted gem to get it to have 6 sockets. You could still use uncut gems to get that 17 up to its natural 20. Now for jewels, so jewels being the ones that come on your tree here, so something like this. It can do nothing. That's the first option. It can add an explicit modifier. which means that you can get upwards of 5 mods on the jewel. It can add a corrupted enchant, and it can also remove an explicit modifier, meaning that it can go from 4 to 3. Now, for Waystones, this is the only one where it seems that there's only 3 options, and this is even according to the wiki. Waystone being a map, if you're more familiar with that vernacular. The 3 options are that it can do nothing. The second option is that it can increase the map tier by 1, and if it does do that, it will randomize the modifiers. Or it can reroll half of the item's explicit modifiers, similar to a rare item as discussed before. Now that we've covered the basics for a Vaal Orb, the thing that augments that is the Omen of Corruption. Omens are an incredibly important crafting tool in Path of Exile 2, pardon me. And they serve a similar function to a variety of different things in the original PoE. I would say they're sort of a mixture of meta mods and harvest mechanics. The Omen of Corruption, though, is unique in its effect. Now, I've heard quite a few people sort of rhetorically discuss this as being, Path of Exile 2's version of a double corruption. And I just want to let you know that is not how it works. However, the way that it does work is very unique and incredibly powerful when given some due consideration. So, an Omen of Corruption can be activated by placing it in your inventory, like such, and by right-clicking it before applying it to a Vaal item. This is also a departure from PoE 1, where an Omen just had to be in your inventory and it would be automatically used. In Path of Exile 2, you got to make sure that you activate it, so don't forget to do that. Following doing that, you would then just click your Vaal Orb and apply it to an item as normal. By doing so, and how an Omen of Corruption works, is it will remove the do nothing as an option from each one of the above the things that we discussed before. And don't worry if you are, if you're having a hard time following along. I actually made a write-up which I will attach below the video, and I'll make that public. So if you want to see what the effects are, how they work, or just follow along with the transcript of this, it will be attached below in a Google Doc. So don't worry. I know it's a lot of kind of word vomit at the moment. But again, it'll remove do nothing as an option. Now, that at first might seem a little bit underwhelming, but the implications for it are pretty crazy. Because this will ensure that the result of the Vaal Orb modifies the item in some way. The only exception to this being item types that cannot receive a Vaal outcome inherently. For example, if you put on a ring, and a ring cannot get a socket, so it removes the do nothing option, but if it picks give a socket, if a ring cannot get a socket, in effect it'll seem like the Omen's doing nothing, but in that case what's happening is it's actually picking one that just is not applicable to that item type. Excuse me for a sec. And yeah, as I mentioned, despite some popular speculation, this is not double corrupting as it exists in PoE. What's important to distinguish is that you cannot get 2 Vaal outcomes simultaneously. For example, if you're using it on a unique item, you cannot both get like a corrupted implicit as well as a socket, or a corrupted implicit and a reroll value of an affix, etc. It can only pick one of those unique options that the corrupted mod can give. It is possible, however, to have multiple affixes receive the 0.78 to 1.22 reroll on unique items. It is unclear yet whether or not the Omen of Corruption improves these odds above a Vaal Orb, as it is technically possible with both, and that'll probably require some more testing over time. For confirmation on this, by the way, it actually was fairly innocuously presented, but if you take a look here, in case you're curious about my source on this, if you look up Omen of Corruption on PoE 2 DB, you'll notice here it's sort of hidden in the text, but type metadata item currency Omen on Vaal remove do nothing outcome. So kind of hidden in plain sight there, but that is what the effect is of the Omen of Corruption. Yes, so while being unable to double corrupt, as some people have speculated its use may be, is probably disappointing to some people, I believe its actual function is, in many, many cases, actually far superior. I also believe that the Omen of Corruption is criminally undervalued at the moment, and can be used in so many ways to generate insane value, profits, and some crazy items, some of which I'm going to share with you guys momentarily. Furthermore, I believe the Omen becomes gradually more important to use depending on the value of the item that you're corrupting. For example, there's not really a need to use one on a Waystone. The possibility of getting nothing as an effect on that bears next to no impact, right? However, on like a 2020 gem that has 5 sockets, that has much more to offer. right? In the case of unique items, especially if it makes the subsequent Vaal Orb have a 75% chance of improving the item, right? So using it on a unique item means that the 4 options that it originally had, right, were do nothing, the add 1 socket, add an enchanted mod, and then raise or lower with the integer values, right? If you remove do nothing, that means that there's still effectively 4 outcomes, which are add a socket, which is good, add an enchant, which is good, raise the value upwards of 22%, which is good, or lower it upwards of 22%, which is obviously bad. But 3 out of 4 of those outcomes now become good, right? So that is crazy, because not only does it basically ensure an effect, so you could do it on items that either have next to no value because it's whatever, the Vaal Orbs are quite cheap, or if you have something that's very, very expensive. One of the most disappointing things in PoE 1 was, you know, taking something like Mage Blood, corrupting it, and having nothing happen. It's like, oh, what a waste. It's pretty underwhelming, right? One of the things I forgot to mention too, in case you're brand new, is that once an item is corrupted, it cannot be modified in any way, nor can it be corrupted again. That is the unique sort of downside of a corrupted modifier. So if that item already has sockets, you can still socket it and stuff like that, but you can't add sockets, and nor can you, well, there's no direct crafting. You can't craft upon rares or anything like that either. This is pretty insane, though, what I just mentioned, because it does have those implications with low-rolled uniques like the ones I have here that I'm going to demonstrate in a sec. I've made several divines in the past couple of days, actually, just using Vaal Orbs on boots like this that are, you know, so cheap that at one point I was actually just disenchanting them for a 1/10 of a chance orb. As well, I've been using them on some higher end stuff that I'm going to show you guys with different ranges, how you can, you know, potentially manipulate that mechanic to make some crazy money. What's cool about these two is because they have a fixed set of outcomes. Now, obviously, there is still a range with something like the 22% up down kind of thing. It is technically calculable, so it's more or less an expected value calculation. You look at the input price of the materials, the probability, and the sale price of your desired outcome, and you can more or less make a distinctly dispassionate mathematical calculation as to whether or not it's going to be a net positive, net neutral, or net negative outcome. And that was one of the things that I used to a great degree of success in Path of Exile 1. And hopefully we'll be able to do that continuing here. Yes, and another thing too is that you can raise the, if you have items, because it also effectively does like a Divine Orb prior to increasing the range, you could take something like, I'm going to demonstrate here, if we look at these boots, they've got a range of 20 to 30% on the movement speed, as well 60 to 120 on the evasion and energy shield. Now, the move speed is going to be a far more determinant price on the, a factor on the price of a boot like this, right? Now, the 20% is obviously the bottom roll. By using a Vaal Orb on this, instead of being forced to use that bottom roll, it can potentially not only raise that up to 30, but it can actually raise it upwards of 35, because 36 would be the highest roll. At the time of writing this as well, as I mentioned, with Omens of Corruption being very cheap, they are only 40 exalts. Now, I know 40 exalts is not the cheapest thing in the world, just in a generic sense. You can see quite a few of them listed at 40x. However, when you compare that to a bunch of the other omens, for example, like Omen of Sinestral Erasure, these are 27 divines. Omens of Whittling, 8 divines. Omens of Dextral Annulment, 15, 20, 30 divines. Many of the purple ones, with the exception of Greater Annulments, are 10, 20, 30 divs a piece. So you're talking thousands of exalts in that case, right? Now, I think that Omens of Corruption actually can serve to have a greater net effect on many, many items than those would. Obviously, those ones are more of a deterministic crafting adjuster, but in particular with unique items, the effect that you can get from Omens of Corruption is just insane. So, now that I've gone through this in rhetoric, and again, do not worry, I will be attaching this, everything I just said there, it's in a written document here. So I will add that to the bottom of the video in case either I speak too quickly, it's hard to follow along, or maybe you don't speak English or whatever. No worries, you can consult that after. But for a more sort of real world feel to it, I've lined up a few things here just to demonstrate to you guys how it works. So we're going to actually do this on 3 different things, and the final 2 are actually one of the most expensive potential outcomes for this, because, you know, I know everybody likes a nice little gamble to end one of these videos. So why don't we take, here you can see I've got a bunch of these BeetleBite boots, which I have a ton of because they come from the same boss that drops the belts that I was farming earlier on. Right? And so these all have a roll of 20% on the movement speed. And then they've got all 100 thorns damage, and then they have a varying ranges on the increased evasion energy shield. So this first one, we've got 20 and 91. And look at that. First one, now it is 26% movement speed. And the 91 was changed, the 100 was changed to 86. And the 91 was changed to 85. So as you can see in that case there, because this has multiple lines of text or multiple affixes, we were able to change multiple ones there with a single Vaal orb. Here we've got 20, 85, 100, and that added, oh shit, sorry, that added a socket. I forgot to do this first. We should be adding sockets to all of these prior to doing them, because if it adds a second socket, that will add value. However, by corrupting it and adding a single socket, it just looks like it's a normal item. That was my mistake. All right, on this third one here, we've got 20, 108, and 100. And there we go. We added an enchant. 20, 73, 100. There we go. Double socket. And that's actually kind of funny. So we got socket, socket, reroll the item range, and we got an enchant there. 20, 98, 100. Enchant. 20, 82, 100. Double socket. 20, 114, 100. Enchant. 20, 72. Oh, and look, this one lowered it. So you can see on the movement speed ranges are 20 to 30, and this is actually 19. So it rolled it on the outside of the range on the bottom end. However, on the thorns damage, you can see that it went to 115 out of 100. So it raised it above the possible range on the high side. So what that tells us too is that if it does pick multiple lines of affixes to alter, it's not like all of them will necessarily go positive or all of them will go negative. Furthermore, they're not going to go necessarily in the exact same value. So again, the range being minus 22 to plus 22%, and then anything in between. So we'll keep this going here just to see how these go, just to give a wider demonstration. So we got 21 move speed, 21, 21, so 21, 82, 26, 103. So we got that 21 to 26, 21, 60. Wow, that's a bad roll. I'm just going to mass maybe hit these ones that go up to 22%, because I'm sure you get the idea. We'll see if we can get one to get the move speed above 30%. Boom! Boom! I sold one of these for 2 divines yesterday. So you can see there, we got 35% movement speed on these now. And these boots, again, these are like 1 exalt boots. Or maybe even less in some cases, just because people have been repeatedly farming that boss over and over, typically going for ingenuity, the belt. But if we just take a look here, beetle boot, and then movement speed. There you go. Well, 1 divine now, but 1 divine, right? 35%. So that's about 70 exalts, whereas this boot, you'd be lucky to get 1x prior with it if it's clean, right? Especially with a low roll. If you got a 30% roll while it's clean, you might get 10 or 15 exalts or something like that. But Vaal orbs right now as well, this is probably an important thing to point out. Vaal orbs are less than an exalt each. So not only do I think that the Omens are criminally undervalued, but I also believe that the Vaal orbs themselves are just extremely cheap, right? 1.4 to 1. So that means that if you buy 5 exalts, it gets you 7 Vaal orbs roughly. So some pretty crazy value there. And we'll just finish off the boots here just for the sake of completion. 22, 22, 22, 19, 22, double socket, 23, goes to 22, 23, 27. Okay, 27, double socket, and here's a 30%er. And that is getting an enchant. Solid. All right, well, I'll price those out afterwards, but that just gives you some indication there. The reason why I picked those is not because they're particularly, there's obviously much better use cases for creating profit or whatever, but that was just the only unique that I had, 20 or 30 pairs of, and I thought it would be a good way to demonstrate the various things that it can do. Just to show another one again here too, these are just maps, again, just to show you a different, type of item that it can be used on. And again, I'm just going to make these magic just to make it easy here. Let's say these drop magic. These are tier 15s, right? And since what I want to hit here is have these be elevated to tier 16s, because if it does hit tier 16, it's going to reroll the modifiers anyways. So in that case here, it rerolled the mods, made it rare. Tier 15s. Oh, that dropped to tier 14. Dropped to tier 14. Made it rare. No effect. Change the mods. Change the mods. There we go. Tier 16. Well, we only got one of them, but it went up and it re-rolled the mods, but it didn't go rare, unfortunately. These ones did as well. So that appears to be the fourth effect. I'm not sure why they didn't show that on the wiki. I haven't done particularly too many of the maps because I've been focused more on the crafting side of things. However, the fourth effect seems to be that it can make it rare with full affixes, which is similar to PoE 1, because that has, as you can see on the right side there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These were all magic, so the fourth effect, which I'll add to the thing, fourth effect for a waystone is make the waystone rare with 6 affixes. And I will message the people with the wiki to update that as well. So that's how it works with the maps. And now, probably the part that most of you guys, well, maybe have not been waiting for, since I forgot to mention it at the beginning of the video because I am a silly goose. Here are Ingenuity Belt. This is one of the most desirable belts in the game. The maximum range on this, as you can see, it's 40 to 80%. Increased bonuses gained from your equipped rings, which means if you have this belt on and you have, like, let's say this ring here, which gives 63 fire res plus the 18, 40, blah, 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 pretty cool ring, that all of these values would be increased by times 1.8. So that 63 fire res would go to 101 fire res, right? And that applies to both rings. When you get things like, if I had a perfectly rolled Venters, for example, you can imagine if you had, you know, is it 45 is the max range, right? 40. So if you had 55 rarity, 40 to all reses, 20 to spirit, and 80 to life, getting that times 1.8, absolutely crazy, right? So the implications of a belt like this are obviously pretty high. It's also quite expensive too. These are about 20 divines as they sit currently, irrespective of roll. Now, what's interesting about this belt, and there are a variety of different unique items that have this. I don't want to give away everyone's possible outcomes on this. If you guys want a follow-up video showing some more strategy for it, I'd be happy to show you that. I just want to get your mind rolling here, but this is a pretty common one, and I had the belts on me, so I thought I would demonstrate. But yeah, these are 20 divines each, even though they both have a low roll on them, right? So this is a 40 divine gamble. So we're going to take 2 different omens of corruption here, right? And what's cool about this is because it only has 1 affix, that means that since we're using an omen of corruption, it cannot do nothing, right? So, it can, because of, if it picks a socket, it could technically do that. But it can either raise the range on this, right? So since the maximum range is 80%, it can go times 1.22, which would be 97.2%. 97, wait, sorry. 17, yeah, I think 97% would be the maximum on the high end, and on the bottom end it could go times 7.8, so 35, 34. Now, the thing is, you could make, it doesn't mean that it's entirely useless to have this at a higher range, right? So like if I had these being like 70, 75%, if I add in an enchant, obviously that would be far more valuable than if I add an enchant to a mid-range roll. So it's not like it doesn't matter at all. However, do keep in mind that when it picks the range swapping, it will randomize the value within the range first. Think of it as using a divine orb and then using the times 1.22 or sorry, 78% to 122%, the randomization within that range. There's effectively a divine orb that takes place first. So if there is a massive increase in the price from the bottom rolled value on this range to the top rolled value on this range, you're probably better off just taking the bottom rolled value, since it's going to divide it anyways. Mostly what you're hedging against, if you get the higher value within the range, is if it picks an enchant or if it picks something like a socket. As I mentioned, it can't pick both at once. But this is a pretty big YOLO. Normally, from an EV perspective, I would do multiple ones of these prior to, but it's a YouTube video. Let's have some fun with it. So we got 52%, and we got an affix, or an enchant. 53%, and we got an enchant. Rest in peace, 40 divs. I'm sure many of you will enjoy that, because sometimes seeing me lose money is more fun than seeing me make it. But just for fun's sake here, why don't we take a look. I believe that when they get an enchant like that, they're worth about 10 divs instead of 20. So it's not a total loss there. But as I mentioned prior to rolling those, if you do get a higher rolled range, it is kind of a hedge against it picking the enchant like that. For some demonstration though, you can see here, if we sort by the max range, we've got 92%, which is 1 mirror. you know, 88%, 180 divs, 180 divs. There's some pretty crazy ones there. And then if you put it on the flip side, you can see if we get some of the cheapest ones here. They've got 10 divs, 11 divs for these bricked ones. And it looks like the cheapest one with an enchant is coming in around 13 with 48. So we actually didn't lose too much money there in terms of just calculating our, you know, potential upside and potential downside, if you think about it that way. We will probably take in about, let's say, 13 or 14 divs each, which if I were to sell them, excuse me, if I were to sell them clean, they would be, you know, about 19 or 20. So we lost 12 divs, right? From 2 of them, 6 divs a piece. Whereas if it had picked to raise the range, and we got the 22% increased value, right? The potential upside on that is, you know, a mirror is what, 250 divines. You could do the exact math on it, and there's lots of actual different uniques that you can kind of fiddle with. And I'll give you guys a couple quick ideas that are very sort of prominent and widely discussed, because I don't think I'll be taking anything out of anyone's mouth here. Taking any food out of anyone's mouth, I should say. If you think about like Astra Mentis, right? The amulet, you get 100 max. That's pretty crazy. The shield Mahuaxels or whatever. I don't know if anyone in the world knows how to pronounce that properly, but it's got the sockets and the 600%. You could raise that percentage to make it even higher, or you can add a third socket, which is pretty crazy. You know, you've got it on a variety of different rings, and there are definitely some very interesting, unique jewels, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that you could raise the values on, especially if they only have 2 lines of text on them, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But again, there are a few people who I told I was making this video to that were like, don't tell my secret. So I'll let people figure it out. Hopefully the mechanics have some clarity to them. And again, I will attach this thing on the bottom here just to so you guys can follow along in case, you know, me talking with my word vomit was a little too confusing. Anyways, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Maybe do a follow-up with another mechanic soon. If you guys have anything you want to see, anything you want explained, if you want to see me do any certain types of crafts, let me know. I'd be happy to do it. I've been working on a variety of different crafts here, a mirror quiver and a mirror bow. And I also recently made the highest evasion chest in the game, 2,700, just under 2,700 evasion. Got to work on the suffixes there. So we got a cool few things in the works as well. I've got about 100 divines of omens on me to get going on these suffixes here. With respect to the bow, in case any of you want to follow up on that, we have spent 5 mirrors so far trying to craft that on the suffixes. When it's done, 730 PDPS plus 3 is what I'm aiming for, but it's a lot harder in PoE 2 to give a strict timeline on that, so we'll see how long it takes, but I assure you I'll be working my hardest. All right, guys, I hope you had a great weekend. Hope you're enjoying Path of Exile 2. If you're new to the channel, hope you enjoyed yourself. For any new subs, thank you very much. For returning, guys, great to see you, and I will see you again shortly. Cheers, fellas.